She buried her son 18 years ago. Today she watched him shake her employer's hand and call him sir, like they'd never met. Talia Reyes stood frozen behind the potted plant in the marble lobby, her grocery bags forgotten on the floor. The boy from the funeral photo, the one she still kissed goodnight on his silver frame every evening, walked past her in a $2,000 suit like she was a stranger. Something about the tilt of his head made her knees go weak. And if you think you know where this story is going, stay with me. Because what Talia finds in the next 24 hours will unravel everything one grieving family thought they knew about the day their son died. Talia had raised that boy from a crying newborn until the day he vanished at 7 years old, and in that time she became the only mother he really knew how to run to. His actual mother, Renata Whitfield, loved him fiercely, but traveled constantly for the family's real estate empire, so it was Talia who packed his lunches, sang him to sleep, and taught him to swim in the very lake that supposedly took his life. When little Caleb Whitfield drowned in a boating accident at the family's lake house, it was Talia who held Renata back from wading in after him. Talia who ironed the funeral clothes with shaking hands. Talia who kept working in that house for 18 more years because leaving felt like losing him twice. She never complained about being treated like part of the furniture. She just watched and cleaned and waited for a feeling she never let herself name. The man in the suit had Caleb's exact walk, that same habit of touching his left ear when he was nervous, and a small scar above his eyebrow that made her chest tighten because Caleb had gotten a scar in nearly that same spot the summer before he disappeared. Talia told herself it was nothing. Grief plays tricks on tired eyes. But something wouldn't let her go home that night, and she found herself standing in an old storage closet nobody had touched in years, pulling down a box that did not belong there. Inside the box was nothing dramatic at first glance, just an old passport photo of a boy who was not Caleb but looked enough like him to be his twin, tucked beside a folded medical invoice from a clinic in Geneva and a torn receipt for a wire transfer with no name attached. Talia almost put the box back, thinking it was leftover paperwork from one of Grover Whitfield's overseas business trips. The Whitfields did business all over Europe, so a Swiss invoice by itself meant nothing. But the date stopped her cold. The invoice was dated 3 weeks before Caleb's funeral, and the passport photo, when she held it beside the framed picture on her nightstand, showed the exact same crooked front tooth Caleb had before he lost it that spring. That was not a coincidence anyone could explain away as a business trip. That was a child who existed on paper in another country at the exact moment her son was supposedly drowning 8,000 miles away. Talia took the box straight to Grover's study, hands shaking, expecting him to laugh and hand her a simple explanation. Instead, his face drained of color, and he snatched the box from her hand so fast he knocked over his coffee, telling her she was imagining things, that grief made people see connections that weren't real, and that her job depended on forgetting this conversation ever happened. That reaction told her everything the papers could not. She left the house that night for the first time in 18 years, box hidden under her coat, and drove straight to the one person who might actually believe her. Renata's younger sister Denise, a local investigative reporter who had covered the drowning years ago and never quite believed how fast the family closed ranks afterward. Denise did not laugh Talia out of her apartment, and that alone told Talia she wasn't crazy. She spread everything across her kitchen table and went quiet for a long time, running her thumb over the passport photo like it might change if she stared hard enough. The Geneva clinic checked out as real. The wire transfer traced back, after 2 days of digging through shell accounts, to Marcus Whitfield, Grover's estranged younger brother, a man the family rarely mentioned at holidays and who had permanently relocated to Europe within a month of the funeral. Denise also pulled her old case notes and found one detail she'd never printed because it seemed irrelevant at the time. The lake house's private dock camera had been wiped clean for exactly 1 week, the same week Caleb disappeared, the only gap in 3 years of footage. Talia went back to work the next morning like nothing had happened because she needed to see the man in the suit up close one more time. She found her chance in the hallway outside Grover's office, dropped her keys on purpose, and looked straight into his eyes when he bent to help her pick them up. He paused, half a second too long. Then he said, quiet enough that only she could hear it, "You still hum that same song when you're nervous." Nobody outside that house had ever heard her humming lullabies except one small boy at bedtime. Talia had to grip the wall to keep from sinking to the floor, right there. His name now was Ronan Cole, hired 3 months earlier as a junior analyst on Marcus's personal recommendation. No interview on record, no background check anyone thought to question, because nobody argues with a Whitfield family hire. Denise dug further and hit a wall that told its own story. Ronan Cole did not exist on paper before age 9, no birth certificate, no early school records, just a boy who surfaced at a Swiss boarding school with a manufactured history and a trust fund that made no sense for an orphan with no family listed anywhere. The full picture finally came together, uglier than either woman had braced for. Caleb had not drowned at all. He had been pulled from that lake alive, sedated, and quietly flown to Geneva under a new identity, because Marcus had spent nearly a decade secretly draining their late mother's trust fund, the one that would legally transfer full control to Caleb the moment he turned 25. If Caleb grew up and claimed his inheritance, the missing millions would surface immediately and expose Marcus's theft. A dead heir, though, meant no audit, no claim, no questions, just Marcus quietly playing guardian to a fortune that was never his to control. When Talia and Denise laid everything out in front of Grover, he did not deny a word of it, and watching him crumble was somehow worse than if he'd lied. He admitted he'd learned the truth almost a decade earlier, when Marcus let something slip during a drunken argument about the trust, and instead of going to the police, Grover buried it to protect the family name and his own guilt at having suspected nothing sooner. By then, he had already stood at a grave, already watched his wife grieve for years, already lied to investigators, and he told himself the damage was already done, so what good would confessing do now? Talia listened to a grown man rationalize 18 years of a mother's unhealed grief, and something in her went cold and very, very steady. She insisted on being the one to tell Renata, not the lawyers, not Grover. She sat with her at the same kitchen table where they used to make pancakes cut into stars for a little boy who refused any other shape. And she slid the passport photo across the table, and she watched a mother's entire body change as the truth landed. Renata did not scream or sob the way Talia expected. She went completely still, staring at that photo like she could will it to blink, and finally asked one question in a voice barely above a whisper. Is he still in there? Or did they take my son and give me back somebody else? Talia did not have an answer to that, only a phone number. The reunion happened 3 days later in Denise's newsroom conference room, cameras deliberately left outside because Talia insisted this moment belonged to the family, not to ratings. Ronan walked in already knowing everything because Talia had called him the night before and told him gently, the same patient voice she used to explain hard things to a scared little boy who couldn't sleep. When Renata saw him standing there at 25, still touching his ear the same nervous way, she didn't say Ronan. She said Caleb, and the room went silent, waiting to see what would happen next. He didn't run to her. He stood frozen for a long moment, and then the questions came out cracked and raw. Where were you? Why didn't anyone come looking? Did you know I was alive this whole time and just let me disappear? Renata answered every single one through tears, telling him she never stopped looking, that she'd hired investigators for years until the money and the hope both ran out, that not one single day passed without her setting a place for him at Christmas, out of pure, stubborn refusal to accept he was gone. Talia stood back and let them have it, because for the first time in 18 years, this reunion wasn't hers to hold. Marcus was arrested within the month once the financial trail reached federal investigators, the fraud alone carrying enough weight to guarantee real prison time, with kidnapping-adjacent charges still being built around the falsified identity documents. Grover was never criminally charged, but the board forced him out within weeks once the story broke publicly, and the family name he'd spent a lifetime protecting became the very thing that destroyed him. Caleb, slowly reclaiming his birth name, chose not to take the recovered trust for himself alone. He funded an organization that helps families reopen child disappearance cases law enforcement closed too quickly, cases that looked exactly like his once did. He set aside enough for his mother that she would never again depend on anyone's mercy for security, and he tried to give a share to Talia, who refused it outright, until he sat her down and told her plainly that she was the only person in that entire house who ever kept looking for him instead of simply accepting the story she'd been handed. The lesson underneath all of it is simple enough to sit with long after the video ends. Power will always tempt someone to bury an inconvenient truth, but truth has a strange patience. It just waits for one stubborn person who refuses to stop noticing. Talia had no money and no power in that house, only attention, and it turned out that was the one thing nobody could buy or silence. If this story got to you the way it got to me while writing it, drop the city you're watching from in the comments, because the next story on this channel might be even harder to believe.